Texans fans, you're watching Houston Texans Today by Chat Sports. I am Will Scott. We're always going to have you covered with the latest Texans rumors, which is why you should subscribe to the channel. We just surpassed 2,100 subscribers, trying to get to 3,000 here in the next couple of weeks. And the more subs that we get, the more content you get. So if you're all about the Houston Texans, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Lots of rumors surrounding this football team right now, and we begin with general manager Nick Caserio. Could he be leaving Houston? John McClain, longtime Houston sports writer, obviously, very much in the know with all things Texans, said he heard at the league meeting a rumor that Caserio could be leaving the Texans after the NFL draft and going back to the New England Patriots. And there's added speculation from Michael Lombardi that we're going to get to here in a second, that maybe he could leave the Texans after the NFL draft, go back to New England, where he spent many years in that front office. He was hired as the Texans general manager in 2021, was a part of that new regime after the firing of Bill O'Brien. As I mentioned, Michael Lombardi also kind of chiming in here. Here's what he said. There's a longer game being played in Houston. I think there'll be some organizational changes in Houston after the draft. I'm not saying people will be fired, but organizationally, things will be shifted. So we hear that from Lombardi. We hear the John McClain report. It is worth noting that John McClain said that he was not buying the rumors that he was hearing at the league meetings that Nick Caserio could be leaving the Houston Texans. Mike Florio also talking about it on Pro Football Talk, saying it's the Jack Easterby departure that could be a factor for Caserio, since it was Easterby who persuaded owner Cal McNair to go off the board as it was fashioned by the search firm and hire Caserio after the team had made a failed effort to hire him away from the Patriots. What if Caserio, though, has had enough of the Texans? What if Patriots coach Bill Belichick, in an effort to hold things together long enough to catch and pass Don Shula on the all-time wins list, is trying to put the band back together? Why would Nick Caserio do this? That's kind of my first reaction to these reports, because Nick Caserio right now is the GM of the Texans. There's not another GM opening right now that's available. Why would he go back to the Patriots to not be the GM, take a downgrade, and still have Bill Belichick making all the personnel decisions? I just don't see why Nick Caserio would do this. But Mike Florio is like, well, what if he's, fed up with the Texans? What if he wants to leave? I mean, he was very aggressive in free agency. The Texans are moving in the right direction, especially after the hiring of DeMeco Ryans. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for the Texans to get rid of Caserio or Caserio to leave Houston right now. I will say this in terms of the Bill Belichick thing. Why would Caserio go and be kind of behind Bill Belichick in decision-making? The only way Caserio would do that is if Bill Belichick promises him that he'll be able to make the final call on personnel decisions. And would Bill Belichick do that? Maybe not. Now, let's say Bill Belichick is planning on retiring here in the next few years and says, okay, when I retire, you can be the GM, you can be the guy making all the personnel decisions. That's the only way that I would see Caserio leaving Houston to go back to New England. Quite frankly, I'm not buying these rumors, but are you buying these rumors? Let me know down in the comment section. Y for yes, N for no. It is the pinned comment on today's video. So when you get hit with an ad break, go and take advantage. Type Y for yes or type N for no. Do you believe the rumors that Nick Caserio could be leaving Houston? Now, I'll say this. I might have believed this if this would have taken place months ago after the season ended, because maybe the Texans just wanted to clean house, completely clean house in the front office, completely clean house with the coaching staff. This would have been a more believable thing if this would have taken place months ago. It is not a believable story now. Now, of course, the Texans fired Jack Easterby, who was rumored to be close to Nick Caserio. Of course, those two were together in New England. They fired Easterby, who was the biggest joke of an executive in sports history, in the middle of the season. Then they hired DeMeco Ryans to be the new head coach, and those two things are probably some of the greatest things to ever happen to the Houston Texans franchise. Now, Caserio has 3 years, and John McClain's reporting he has $15 million left, so $5 million per year left on his contract. So that's another thing. His contract has several years on it. He's owed $15 million. Why would he give that up? Why would the Texans be willing to pay a buyout? It just does not make any sense. Both sides don't make sense. The Texans may be moving on from Caserio, and Caserio moving on from the Houston Texans. I believe that Nick deserves at least another year. Let him draft who he believes is going to be the franchise quarterback for years to come and see how the roster does this year. Now, if the roster does not show improvement, then okay, maybe evaluate moving on next year because you added a lot of talent to this roster in free agency. You're also going to add a lot of talent to this roster in the draft later this month. Taking a look at some notable moves that have been made in Caserio's tenure. He's done a good job. Drafted Nico Collins. That was his first draft. Drafted Derek Stingley. Drafted Kenyon Green. Jalen Petrie was an absolute steal. Dameon Pierce was an absolute steal. And then we get into some of the moves that have been made this offseason. You trade for Shaq Mason. He's going to be your new starting guard. You extend your franchise left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, the largest deal ever given to an offensive lineman. Signed Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz, and Devin Singletary. I think it surprised people how aggressive the Texans were in free agency, and that's not even all the moves. We don't have enough room on this graphic for all the moves. They also signed Jimmy Ward. I mean, there is a lot of impressive moves that Nick Caserio has made in his tenure, and I do believe that he deserves some more time here to kind of build this thing. You know, you look at how he handled the Deshaun Watson situation. You know, he was patient throughout that process. He gets an absolute haul for Deshaun Watson, 3 first-round picks. The Texans, before he got to Houston, had no draft capital. He added a lot of draft capital. So I like what Nick Caserio has done. And look, I understand, you know, the narrative about, oh, the Texans need a clean house, you know, get everybody that was here, you know, last year and the year before out of town. I understand that. And I especially understand the Easterby connection and maybe wanting to move on from Caserio because those two were here together. But Caserio deserves another year to see how this roster he built shakes out. Do you want Nick Caserio to stay as the Texans GM? Type S for stay or type L for leave down in the comment section. Go down in the comment section. Let me know. I want him to stay at least for another season. But why would he leave after the draft? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, he's going to draft all these guys and he's going to bounce right after the draft. If the Texans have, you know, any sense that he's going to leave, they should just let him go now before the draft and do your best to kind of get someone in charge before the draft. But it makes zero sense for Nick Caserio to leave after the draft. The Texans have a multitude of picks. I just do not see that happening. Speaking of the draft, could the Texans be drafting Will Anderson at number 2 overall? Matt Miller of ESPN reports that Will Anderson is number 1 on the Houston Texans draft board. And this comes when we're hearing a lot about maybe the Texans not taking a quarterback at number 2 overall. Will Anderson had a fantastic career at Alabama. In my opinion, is the best defensive player in this class. Over 200 tackles, 58.5 tackles for loss, 34.5 sacks. 1 forced fumble at Alabama. He was the best defensive player in the country the last 2 years. Anderson is great. I am a huge Will Anderson fan. Like I said, best defensive player in this draft. I expect him to be the first non-quarterback off the board, but a QB has to be the pick for the Texans here at number 2. And Nick Caserio and company should not overcomplicate this. If Bryce Young is off the board, you take C.J. Stroud. If C.J. Stroud is the pick at number 1 for the Panthers, you take Bryce Young. It's really not that complicated. Do you want to draft Will Anderson? Type D for draft or type P for pass down in the comment section. I'm typing P for pass. Big Will Anderson fan. But a quarterback, I repeat, a quarterback has got to be the pick for the Texans at number 2 overall. And if it's not, I cannot imagine the reaction from this fan base. And stay tuned for my reaction as well. It's not going to be pretty. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to have you covered with all Texans draft news and rumors. We're actually going to get you guys a draft rumors video tomorrow.